And we're live.
How's it going? This is Jim Groom, and I am here to introduce the first session of Unit 6 of Connected Courses, which is called, in keeping with the class, Connected by Design. And it was our vision for this class, and we'll see if this holds true, that it would have a whole bunch of different approaches to think about, whether it be the history of the web, questions of gender and identity on the web, broader ideas of how you co-learn, but then end it with a unit that's very focused upon how you actually build an architecture around this notion of a connected course, which kind of assumes a lot of ideas. It assumes an idea that, you know, a connected course is one specific thing and that there's one specific architecture. And I just want to kind of warn you that we're not going to be suggesting, okay, now you've been through 5 weeks of this seminar, you know, buy our kind of knives or whatever. There's a lot of different ways to think through and imagine a connected course, and not all of them are predetermined on any one technology. So I just want to be clear about that. But we do have a group of people here who have spent this semester actually experimenting with a series of tools to imagine what connected means in relationship to a virtual environment that they build and design as part of their class. And so this conversation will really focus on that idea. I think I was elected, for lack of a better word. I don't think anyone voted, actually. So to talk about this, because I have been part of a course for the last 5 years now. I can't believe it's actually 5 years old, called DS-106, or Digital Storytelling, which has some of the kind of infrastructure that people have likened to a connected course environment. So I'm going to talk about that very quickly for about 4 or 5 minutes. And then I'm going to pass it on to one of our illustrious panelists who will talk about what they've done. And then we'll move like that as a round robin. About halfway through, so in about 20, 25 minutes, we'll stop. We'll talk amongst ourselves in discussion, and we'll pull in any questions you have. So if you have questions, please ask them on Twitter using the CCourses hashtag. Put them in the chat here in the Google Hangout, and one of us will address them immediately and even maybe pull them into the video. Okay, so I've spoken my piece. This is, you know, what it is. Don't get too excited, but don't get too depressed, because it's going to find itself somewhere between those two extreme states of emotion. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about DS-106 as a course and as a philosophy that I think does embody some of the ideas of connected courses, but more importantly as an architecture that tries to bring community through this distributed notion of the web. The assumption that we made with DS-106, I think, early on, and it wasn't a kind of, you're going to get a little inception here right now, so forgive me for that. But it wasn't necessarily the idea that we figured out, okay, DS-106 is a connected course. I don't think we knew what a connected course was before we did DS-106. But the idea was that we would build a class where each student would actually maintain and control their own domain on their own web hosting. So they would actually install their own blog, let's say a WordPress blog, at their own domain, say, you know, johnnycomelately.com, and they would do all their work there. Now, they would do it there, but DS-106, the site, ds106.us, would be the hub. And this hub would actually syndicate in all the posts from various students. So here you see an example of a course site that is bringing in posts from all these different students. And the idea is, if I were to click a particular post, what I would get is I would get an example of the student's blog, right? This would be the student's blog. This would be the post. They did an actual, we're doing the class right now is about The Wire. It's what I've been doing all semester. I've been consumed by it. And this student created a Wire PS4 game, Battlefield Baltimore. And that was their kind of mashup cover of a kind of video game with a PS4. Now, where did they get the idea from that? Well, they're getting feedback from their peers. These are all people who are finding these posts through that aggregated hub. And we have something called an assignment bank, which actually shares a whole series of assignments. So, example, one of the assignments in that assignment bank is this assignment, which was submitted by a student who said a really cool mashup assignment would be to mash up a video game. And so you'll notice what we're doing here is everyone who's done that assignment on their respective blog is being pulled in. So I can click here to see this person's assignment, where it was. I could click on here and actually see a mashup of another different. You got Omar's face on Shadow of Mordor on Middle Earth. So we have students who are actually mashing up the wire based on a particular assignment that's part of a broader assignment bank. And one of the things that we did with DS-106, and to varying degrees of success, is we built these spaces that aggregate students' work, not only on the course space, but also on an assignment bank, and then on what we call a daily create. A daily create is something that students do on a somewhat regular basis. It has Did You Create Today, and you'll see this is the daily create for today is create a little error message. And so you'll notice if you go to the daily create, we have people who are creating error messages about DS-106 because it always seems to be self-referential about the community. And it actually has a series of just regular daily creates that people created, and they put it on Flickr. And then what this does is it aggregates it in a place. And I really had a tremendous amount of fun with the daily create this semester for a variety of reasons. But one of them is just I found like it's supposed to be a 10-minute creative exercise that people do and then move on. But I found students taking hours on what's supposed to be a 10-minute assignment because they loved it. And so one of the things that happened with the kind of concept of aggregation and syndication, which is pulling people's work from their own space on the web to these aggregated hubs like the DS-106 site or like the assignment bank or like the daily create, was that you can have spaces where students own and control their own work, but we can actually bring them in through a stream and flow idea into a specific place where the community of the class can come together and give feedback. But also it could be something that the student owns and takes with them. So it's a trying attempt to balance this notion of community, which is essential to the notion of a class and to being connected, at the same time respecting the student as an author, as a creator, and as a thinker, and trying to help them maintain and control that data, which I think is something the LMS does terrible at. And so for us, the connected course as an architecture was using WordPress, to be clear, and it was taking WordPress as the student's own personal blog, and we were using DS-106 as an aggregator hub, where Feed WordPress became something that these students would sign up, would drop off their URL, and we would automatically aggregate in their posts. So every post you saw on that DS-106 page was coming in because the student added their personal URL to a form on DS-106. That's kind of how we built the aggregated syndicated hub. Now, Alan Levine has made a cottage industry of this, and he's gone on and he created the Connected Courses site. You know, he created work for a whole series of people. TRU, Harvard, Chico, I think he's done work for, and he does amazing stuff. And so it's the idea that there is an architecture behind the Connected Course. But I think I will kind of channel Alan for a minute, and then I will hand it off to Jaimie Hoffman, who can talk more about her particular experiences. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be WordPress. It doesn't necessarily have to be self-hosted in your own blog on your own domain necessarily. You know, you could do something like a Connected Course in Tumblr, right? If you put people in the same Tumblr, had them follow each other, you could get a very similar experience on Tumblr. But one of the questions that comes up, and for me was always at the heart of DS-106, is having students get their own domain and get their own web hosting was also about them interrogating this notion and this ecosystem of the web and making sense of how these things work, and that being a real viable skill and thought process, theoretically and practically, for them to understand what it means to maintain and control their data. And so, without getting too kind of hyper-political or hypercritical, there was also this sense of interrogating the landscape of the web to truly understand it. And that's kind of where the connected comes in too, is like, what is our responsibility to teaching our students to think critically about this platform, rather than put them in a system and say, eat this or shut up, right? But really having them kind of understand what it is they're eating and why. So I don't know if eating is a good metaphor, but before I go any far afield, I am going to hand it over to Jaimie Hoffman, who is teaching a series of classes at Cal State University Channel Islands and doing some amazing work. So Jaimie, let me pass the baton right now.
All right, well, hello everyone. Well, I kind of happened upon this journey of connected courses, potentially in a similar way as many of you, but also maybe quite different. I actually had taught online and in blended format for several years, and some folks at my university identified me as being someone who might like to attend this workshop over the summer. And in all honesty, I didn't really know much about the workshop, but I heard that the people attending were great and amazing, and so that was enough for me to go. And so when I got there, I was learning about open connected courses. I kind of didn't really know what it was at first. Then once I kind of understood, oh, I see the classes are open on the web, so people can make connections, I thought, well, that's good for you guys who might want to do that, but I didn't necessarily see how that fit or aligned with the outcomes I try to achieve in my classes. But then I kept learning more and listening more, and I started thinking about the potential that opening classes on the web could provide to me and the kind of connections I could make. So for opening the classes, what I really like is how much I can control the look and feel of the class itself so that I can tailor it to meet the outcomes that I want to achieve. And though you can get pretty creative in an LMS, there are some limitations because there's just the wall of having to log in. So the aggregation and syndication, they were just big words for me during the summer, but I didn't really know how I was going to do it if I was going to. But it sounded like a good idea, and I heard something similar to what Jim shared. I heard that over the summer and much more. And I thought that that would be really great for students. And so I kind of didn't just dip my toe in. I kind of dipped my whole body into trying open courses this semester, and I've used varying degrees of connections. And I like that that's how Jim started this chat, is that we're all going to define connecting differently. And for me, I needed to understand how this would really enhance my students' experience, because I have a very clear idea of what kind of presence I want to have in an online environment, or even just a face-to-face environment with web presence. And I wanted to make sure that this was going to be purposeful. So I'll show you briefly a little bit about what I've done. Let me see if I can get screen share on here. And I'm teaching 5 classes this semester, and I have put all of my classes on WordPress, so they're all linked here. And I really thought about the different needs of each class. So public speaking, there's already enough stress as it is, so we're not really doing much with technology. However, all of my resources are available online. And then for this course, Leading and Teaching for Excellence, this is an entirely 100% web-based course. I should say we met 3 times face-to-face. And I utilize the blogging on this page for my announcements that I got a plugin that messages to the students. And then my weekly assignments here. Then the student posts are aggregating in a similar method as what Jim had noted for DS-106. And let's see, also then for a different course that I teach, I'm primarily using blogging, and I'm really excited about this particular course in that I was able to utilize this theme that was created, I believe, by Oberlin College. And this has provided a solution for me that I had been looking for all semester, which was to really aggregate the students' blogs, not in this sort of stream of consciousness blog role, but in a way that clearly identified the student. And because I require that other students go back and comment, and that way there was a little bit more of a streamlined process, for lack of another way of defining it. So that's kind of what I had set up here, and what this class has been really interesting for is that it's a face-to-face class where we talk about pretty high risk, one could say, topics. And I have the students blog about their reflections from each class as we've attended it, as well as the I have that, and then the readings for that week. And what I've found through this experience of them blogging is the fact that they share things that they either wouldn't in a face-to-face setting because they don't feel as comfortable, or they need that time to process. And so that's actually been a really great complement to that class. And then the last thing I'll share with you that I've done this semester is that the last class, and I'll go back to screen share briefly, but the last class I have done open is the one that I've actually done a connection to, and that is my group communication class, which I've based on the theme of Survivor, and I've utilized that in a variety of ways. You can see there's blogs each week. They have to blog about what they saw in the Survivor and how it aligns with the course content. They're doing a group page, and so if you'd like to check that out, you can. It's a group project for the end of the semester. But none of this would really be possible if I was using an LMS. Even this, we had a Twitter chat, and this is the class back channel for those students who didn't want to participate. But I also did this module called Diversity in Groups, and I did this, it was an asynchronous module that I did with a friend of mine in Japan, and his students are learning English. My students were learning about group diversity at the time, and we utilized VoiceThread, where students commented both on questions that we posed throughout our sort of mini lectures, and then at the end we asked them to ask each other questions. And that was really what sold me on making the course connected, because not only does my institution really value international perspectives, but really, let's face it, we all should. And we were able to just sort of break down not just the walls of the university, but also, lots and lots of distance. And I think, we can talk with students face to face or even online about what it's like living in a collectivist culture, but when they got to hear it through speaking with folks who actually live in that country, it was really pretty meaningful. So it's been quite a journey this semester. I'm super thankful for everybody who's helped me put everything together. I've actually been collecting student feedback through the process. I'm going to do a bit of a couple of publications from it, primarily because for me, I think what all of this is, I've been given feedback that this is all cool, and that's great, and I'm all about technology for it being cool, but to me it's more important to know that students are valuing it and that they're learning from it. So that's what I'm sort of in the process of sifting through their responses to reflections and that kind of thing. And interestingly, they did push back at first, but I also pushed back a little bit, and I kept the expectations up there. And when I say push back, they were really hesitant to utilize so much technology. And so I shared with them things like the new Common Core standard that requires that children can collaborate and research online. And so I said, you're either going to have children or nieces and nephews who are going to need to know this stuff, or you're going to be competing against others who do know this. And so it's been an experience. Some of the students who were really, really resistant at the beginning of the semester have messaged me back and thanked me. So we'll see. That so far the responses are pretty positive, but that is my experiences in a nutshell. So I will pass it back to you now, Jim, to introduce the next person.
Yay! Did I unmute? Can you hear me?
Does Kim Jaxon need an introduction?
Yes.
Who's that crazy from Chico?
We're gonna have 3 Chico people in a row. It's almost too much Chico for.
Is there like plural for Chico? What is that?
Rural Chico. So I was stoked to hear Jaimie talk through her courses. I was dying to see. I feel like, so Jaimie's actually, within the same system. She's in the CSU system. She's way south and we're way north. But I'm excited to see the work that Channel Islands is doing to support faculty as they try to do some of this. What does a syndication mean? What does segregation mean? What does it mean to do all this labor? So it's cool to see how it's playing out. And I'm also struck by when we end up talking all together in our attempts to do this, Jaimie, what really resonated with me is, trying to work through some of the pushback that can happen, and often I ask students to be their least cynical selves for about 4 weeks, and just hang in there, because the learning curve can be a little steep, and that it's a place to play and experiment, and some of it won't work and we'll return to it. And I get some buy-in from that I'm going to play with it. But yeah, and I don't blame them. Not everybody wants to be as connected as some of us, so that's reasonable too. I'm going to talk about the work that I did this semester really quickly, because I'm dying to hear Jaimie and Danielle talk through some of their new ideas for some lit courses they're designing. But I came out of this summer, and I had been working with WordPress for about a year and a half or so, and had my own site, and all my courses were on WordPress. So that I have always seen the need for a course to be open and some of the student work to be public, so that you connect them to communities of practice that exist outside of those four walls. So I didn't need a lot of convincing there. But Mimi Ito said something to me, or maybe to just the group, that just struck a chord, which is she wished that we would provide more opportunities for youth to participate in some of our college courses. And I thought, oh my God, that's brilliant. Like, why haven't I done that? Haven't I done that? I know all these great K-12 teachers from my work in the writing project, and I can't wait to work with them. So I came back and contacted Wendy Ferrone, who is an amazing 7th and 8th grade teacher at a local school here in Chico. And we just decided to have her 8th graders participate in, and I'll just tweet out the link to the course with my future teachers, who we're going to read young adult novels together. And so while some faculty might be afraid that when we talk about connected courses and the practical applications, it means you're supposed to make a MOOC or something, you're supposed to do this big thing and have all these people come to it, I actually think some of the work that we can do with connected courses is really simple. Like, go across the street to your local, elementary or junior high and say, hey, you want to participate with us in this college course? So it did two things for us. One, my future teachers could see actual, real 13-year-olds and the amazing work that they could do with reading young adult novels. It expanded our own reading list. Some of those students were reading 3 or 4 novels a week and pushing our abilities. And for the 8th graders, they were getting this chance to work with these older, peers and mentors, these older cool kids from college, and the activity on the blog just went nuts. I mean, you just could not keep up. The 8th grader would blog, the college student was responding, they're sharing books. Sometimes they'd post things like, oh my God, I'm on page 100, write me back when you get there, and then they'd have this exchange about whatever point in the novel that they were in. The other move that we made was more face-to-face. We created artifacts based on those young adult novels, things like The Giver and Maze Runner and all those great books, and invited the 8th graders to come to our class at Chico State. And so one evening they joined us, and we basically had a big maker fair where we made artifacts and we did a gallery walk based on the books that we were reading. So we also got to meet them in person. So I think even just a small move where what you remember is not necessarily the apparatus around creating a connected course from the technology side, but just like Jim always reminds us of, these more principles of connecting our students to real, real communities that are outside of our class too. And we can talk a little bit about the grad class. We did a special topics course that Jaimie and Danielle have been in there with me. It's been weird. It's truly been inquiry driven, and people have taken a lot of different paths, but we've been participating in connected courses together. And we are about to release, we're not quite ready to go live yet, but we are about to release a resource that takes all the things we've learned from connected courses and our own research trajectories and throws that out there for the world to use. And we've called it CHICO, which stands for something like, because I don't have it open, creative, hybrid, innovative, something, and open. And so we used our acronym and basically took our course website, where I have the student blogs, RSS feeding into that course, and are turning it instead into a resource. And we'll have research, we'll have the examples of the courses we've designed, we'll have makes that we've done, and just some of the resources that we've curated that we think are the most helpful to get started. So we'll share that. We have 2 class sessions left, so we'll probably share it in about a week from Thursday. So I'm going to turn it over to Danielle. You want to kick us off, and Jeremy, you can jump in and kind of introduce yourselves, and then talk through kind of the work you guys have been doing. And I'm so excited.
Okay, thank you. So Jeremy and I have been working on creating a connected literature course to engage two separate introductory literature classes here. They're GE classes, and him and I have both taught sections of it, and he's currently teaching one. So we're trying to develop a way to connect the both of them online and in person. So it's a hybrid class, meets 3 days a week, and this is a structure that we kind of just came up with actually. It's they would meet Monday, Wednesday in their separate classes and do the work with the literature and the discussions and whatnot. And then on Fridays, both classes would come together and meet in a jumbo setting where they would do the creative work and the making and the playing, and also being able to share with each other, the two classes, like the different literature that they've been reading. So the two classes are separate, but they come together for shared benchmarks and goals and bigger makes, things like that. So I tweeted out the website, and I think I'm going to try and do a screen share to show it to you. I don't know if I can do that, but here we go. Is that working? I hope so.
Yes, it is working.
Oh, thank you. All right, so it's a pretty simple course right now, and I've actually just put in the blog feed from our English 692 class just so that there'd be stuff up there, but I was pretty excited when I was able to figure that out. It only took me maybe a day and some money, so I had to learn how to host my own website, things like that. So you can see just by looking at the website what the structure is kind of like. So here you have the course info, the shared info. There's one syllabus, a schedule with benchmarks, but they're two separate classes that you can see here. So both teachers retain the autonomy, and the classes are definitely separate. This is all about the students and connecting. And then each unit is tied together with some loose thematic unity. So you have the adaptation in the buildings we're on, which is basically a coming-of-age story. So there's a lot of different ways that teachers and students could contribute to that unit. And so there's a shared overview, shared makes, seminars that the students would attend on Fridays. But then if you look, each class has a separate reading list and a separate reading schedule. So Literature for Life is the one that Jeremy teaches, and I taught a great book section. So both of us have the chance to take our own unique perspective on what an adaptation or remix is. So, oh geez, I don't know, there's so much to talk about that I want to share. But the blog is, or the website is where all of that, all the stuff that they create and all the things that they write about would kind of end up on that hub there. So that's a pretty basic setup for that website. And there's another one. Jeremy's going to keep talking about that. I just want to share really quick this other way that I'm using. So this other way that I'm using a connected course format that's really similar to the DS-106. I actually looked at that a lot as I was building the second one, and it's for study abroad alumni. I studied abroad my last year as a Chico State undergrad. Oh, am I not up? Oh no, what did I do? What happened to me?
It's the eye in the sky. We still see you. You're UCAM 5, and I kind of like it. It kind of makes it all kind of a little trippy. Like, is the NSA in here? What is she really doing with her course?
What happened?
Oh, here she's back.
All right. Sorry about that.
Connected courses. It could be your life.
Okay, so the Study Abroad alumni website, I'm using that as a way to connect the blogs that a lot of the people who have studied abroad already have created, but it's a place where they would be an audience for each other. There would be missions for them to complete as kind of blog assignments, and there's different units, and like the DS-106, they can come in and at any point contribute something to the website. So I think that's cool. And the reason why I'm doing that is there's not a lot of support for study abroad alumni, and there's even less support for students who finish their last year of classes while they're abroad and they don't come back to campus. So really a connected course is the best option for not ignoring the needs of the kind of broken alumni that just got back after a crazy experience. So that's another way that I'm using it, and I'm hoping that the school will promote that for me when the time comes. But I'll turn it over to Jeremy now. He can talk more about our literature class.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll do my best. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Like I said before, this is a great experience for us. Yes, my name is Jaimie Wallace. Just to introduce myself, I'm a grad student here at Chico, and I teach literature courses, and I'm studying literature. Danielle really said most of the stuff that has to do with the course, but I figured I'd fill you guys in a little bit on the steps maybe that I took for myself to come to this conclusion that I really wanted to do a connected course or even be involved in something like this. I think first and foremost, I know, like Dr. Aping saying, he's our chair here and my chair in my thesis, one of our professors. He said the same thing that Mike Wesch said in his the why we need a why in that session. That's the most important to me, is the why, the learning outcome. Like, what is it that I want my students to get out of this? What is it that they're gonna get that's gonna be different from that typical course that they're sitting through, or things like that. That was the most important thing right away. That really helped me structure my portion of the course around it. To really get to the conclusion of like the assignments I wanted, or the way I wanted things to roll. And then it really helped having a partner in crime that really could, you know, bend with me and really work with me on things, and we could put aside our own, like our own egos, right, in a teamwork, and really work together to something. That really helped, you know, to make this. So those were two of the big things right away, was finding somebody who maybe didn't have similar ideas or like-minded thinking, but had ideas that were going in the same direction as me, as well as, again, the most important thing is the student learning and the student outcome, and what it is they're going to take away. So that was really first. After that, the technology portion that people always talk about isn't so important to me. I'm not very technologically advanced. This is about as technical as I get right here. This is almost scary for me. I got goosebumps thinking about it. You know, I'm not this. This isn't me. You know, the web is really scary for me. And I think having people to surround yourself and people to work with that are good at stuff like that, to make it comfortable, that helped. But it's about connecting the students to places outside those four walls. That's what really this piece of technology brings to it. Kim always says it the best thing, you know, this right here was a technology at one time, right? This right here is a technology at one time. You know, this keyboard is just a technology now, but they're all technologies, and we still need to use all those things. The structure that's been laid in place for us by all the scholars before us, those are great things, and we're not trying to get rid of them. That's the important thing. We're trying to build on this structure. It's so important to keep those things around, because that's what made us and helped shape us into the people we are as students and educators. We need to really just embrace those things, but build on them for the 21st century. You know, I feel like I'm rambling, you guys. I'm just letting you know. I feel like I'm rambling. There's a lot of cool things. I think Danielle said it best. Like, there's so many cool things to say about this course, and so many ways to go. It's just something that you really have to embrace. You have to really just, like, I think Jaimie said it, you know, don't just get your feet wet, right? You just jump in, dive in, head first, right? I bumble Howard's quote from the beginning, but, you know, if you don't feel like you're falling, you're probably not on the edge, and that's the truth. If you don't feel like it's hard all the time, then you're probably not doing something right. It shouldn't be easy. It just shouldn't. So I hope I said enough. I don't know what else to say. I feel like I could talk forever about this, because it's so passionate.
Actually, Jeremy, I actually think you're making really good points, because I was just having a conversation with a colleague this morning about that if not higher ed and in our college classrooms, where else should you be taking risks? I mean, why wouldn't this just be a big playground where, and mostly what you would do in a classroom is fail. mostly what you would do is fail, because the work you're trying to do is so hard and innovative and on the edge that you couldn't really be successful at it all the time. Like, or at least have a day set aside where, let's just play with this. So I actually think and that you need a community that trusts you and that you can trust, because it is scary when you're making all your stuff public. That's for sure.
Very scary.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the question that came up, and thank you, everybody. I mean, that was a tour de force. That was awesome. And what it leaves me thinking about a little bit is, we have this notion, and you ended with this, Jeremy, so it might be nice to pick up on it, is, if it's not easy, it's not worth it, right? Like, there's that notion that there's some difficulty of wrapping your head around it, which goes to what you were saying, Kim, about, where is this going to happen if it doesn't happen here? And, I am totally of that school. Like, when I started DS 106 to give students their own domain and web hosting in 2010, everybody was like, no way, we're not doing this, we're not sysadmins, we don't drink Mountain Dew, the whole thing. And I was like, we're going to try it. And if it doesn't go, it doesn't go. And they did it. It took us like 2 or 3 weeks, but they did it. And 5 years later, it takes us like 2 hours. And it's weird how different that experience was. And one of the things we did do in order to get people up and running with their own domains and help them make their own course sites, which you all are doing, is we made it a little easier. Like, we figured some stuff out along the way to make some of that maybe unnecessary technical kind of obstacles a little bit more seamless. And I guess a question I have for everyone is, what were the most, as you're building your own connected course, and I absolutely, that pedagogy you guys are talking about, obviously, it's right on. You give your students a sense of community, they're connected, they work between sections, right? They're playing Survivor on an island, and who knows, there may be cannibalism, we'll see. But this notion is that there's this sense of like an architecture you're building. And where did it work? Like, how was it simple, and how did it make your life easy? And where do you see, like, there is no way I could convince this other faculty member, who I think is an awesome teacher and would love this, there's no way they're going to do it because of the technology. Anyone want to speak to that? Because that's a struggle. I as I'm a kind of proselytizer or whatever for this stuff, I have to be mindful that you guys are busy and that people have other lives rather than worrying about putting a URL into feed WordPress. So what does that mean? And anyone want to take that up? Or you can go wherever you want with it.
Yeah, and I'll bet Jaimie will have lots to say to this too. I think, Jim, you hit on it when we talk to people about teaching and course design. I don't start with what's efficient. I mean, I'm the worst person to talk to about, is that the most efficient way to do it? I don't really care. Like, is it the better way to do it? I'm going to do it, even if it means that I'm copying and pasting 70 email addresses into a WordPress site to get my students joined to make it easier for them, right? Like, I will do that stuff. So those are the kinds of things that I am trying to be better about, being very honest about, that no, it's not necessarily better or worse, it's just different. But there is some labor that I'm willing to do up front. It's not through the whole semester usually, it's some upfront labor, and it's things like getting students on the site. They aren't just loaded for me, right? But if you're having them create their own blogs, you're supporting that, right? You're supporting as they do that, and then you're getting it fed. There's this kind of 2-week, I'd say, cycle at the beginning of the semester that can feel a little, getting everyone where they're supposed to be. And you just have to see it as a sense of play, and it's okay, and if it doesn't work, it'll be fine. And mostly those students will help each other, right? They'll all help each other figure it out. They'll learn things that us geeks know to do, which is, like, Google it, right? If I don't know how do you get the RSS feed in WordPress, right? I Google that, and then I get forums, those kinds of things. So I think the efficiency question is one that I think we have to be honest about. It's not necessarily always efficient, although there's ways, right, that we all work. I'm not interested in working, harder. And the grading thing. I think the assessment and grading thing gets complicated. And questions come up about, if you're going to have students working, for example, the 8th graders and the college freshmen or college future teachers, working across this blog. Am I supposed to, give them points for every time they respond to an 8th grader? And what if the 8th grader doesn't blog for a few days? Like, all that stuff has to go a little bit out the window. You just have to talk to them about participating and doing their best effort to make those connections. And you can't get in too much to those tidy little, I'm going to give you a point every time you do this thing. You're just going to do it.
That's a really great point, Kim. And I mean, for my own part, this semester we had DS 106, 27 students, and there were 2,200 blog posts as of today. And so whatever you say, like, I'm not going to read 2,200 blog posts. Like, I hope that the community can scale fractally so that they can read each other's. But there is this thing like coverage. Like, I expect students to have some autonomy and to do that, and I'm not there all the time, and I'm not necessarily the center locus of all authority at all times. And that stuff really does get to the connected course principle, but it gets to why some people see 2,200 posts as part of your class and say, no way, I have enough work. And so that labor management you're talking about is an interesting one. I mean, Jaimie, you actually built 4 classes. Like, you were like, I'll try one. And at the end of August, right, you put on your hard hat and you got into WordPress, the guts of WordPress, and built it. So I'm really interested in, like, what was the process of building it like? What advice would you give to other people? Danielle, you spoke to the fact that you spend a day figuring out how to do web hosting and domains, which is awesome. Like that, to me, if that happened, that's the magic, and the learning will come as a result of just feeling actually brave enough to cross that chasm that so many people aren't. So I'm interested in those theories, those experiences for other people who are thinking about going this way.
Sure, I'll share a little bit about my experiences. For me, I think that the technology was not really the hardest part. The hardest part was making sure that I wanted to, or first figuring out what is it that I want students to get out of this, kind of what, Kim has said and everybody has reiterated. We don't just do this because it looks great. We need to have meaning behind it. So for each class, it was thinking about what is the purpose that I want to achieve here. And to me, that's what being innovative is about, which is coming up with solutions to questions and not just doing things the way we've always done it, right? So there were some things that just made sense as far as how to set up the WordPress site. I had a 1-hour tutorial with you, Jim, over the summer, and that was kind of enough for me to have a starting point. And then, like Kim said, Google. WordPress this, WordPress that. Probably WordPress is like burned into my Google search at this point in time. I have a genuine curiosity for sort of help, figuring things out myself. I'm independent. I like to do it myself. But I will admit that I couldn't have done it without the folks here at CI or Jim, who would respond to my email about, like, what's the plugin that you use for X, Y, and Z. So I honestly feel like the most difficult thing was what Kim was just talking about, which is the students and their role through the process and figuring out what my role is as well. That's been kind of challenging. My students, maybe it's because of the specific courses that they're in, they're gen ed courses, because it's been a bit different for the capstone courses, and then over the summer I did teach some graduate courses. But the students perceive almost all of the things that I've had them do as just extra work. And so I've had to really just stay sort of strong and committed to a greater sort of purpose, which I really do believe in this. The technology is not going away, and that's what I tell the students. So that's pretty important. The other thing is you do have to be just willing to try stuff, right? If I could go back, would I have done all 4 at once? Possibly not. Things have been fairly easy to do, but there are some things that I should have allocated 3 times the amount of time for, like a Twitter chat, because not all of the tweets were aggregating. That's a silly thing, but I did an online module with a local high school to achieve something similar that as what Kim mentioned. But my issue was that my students built this online module, but they weren't necessarily I didn't necessarily feel a lot of confidence that the module was going to go in.
See, that was intentional to keep everybody on the cliff. Do you know what she's going to say? Can you figure it out? I don't know what she's going to say, so when she comes back in, we'll figure that out with her. But one of the things, as she was talking, that I think reinforces some of the things that more generally is, this notion of assessment and this notion of management of all these different things, and of a very different, like the LMS is designed for management, right? The connected course environment is not designed for management. In some ways, it works to make, as Kim is so willingly able to do, to jump in and, make it that much more kind of possibly messy would be a good way to describe it. And there's some value to that. There really is. But I think one of the things that, as new people try this is, like I think Jaimie was saying, you get support from people, you experiment with plugins, you figure out how domain and web hosting works. You figure out some things, and Danielle, you mentioned this as well, like that I think are just good literacy tools and fluency tools. And as an instructor or as a graduate student or as an instructional technologist like me, like these are valuable tools for understanding like the 21st century notions of education and what that means and all the complexity of that term. So I'd be interested, Danielle, you mentioned it, and I'm going to come back to you while Jaimie is framing out some of that stuff and getting that work. Like, what was it like to finally get up and running with your own domain and web hosting? I know for me, like, that was the birth of my instructional technology world. Like, oh my God, domains, web hostings, I can install my own WordPress. Like, it's like someone brought the curtain to the web and unveiled it, and there was, the web at my hands and at my disposal.
It was definitely empowering. After I figured it out, I sent Kim an email with the subject in all caps was "Victory is mine." And it really is an empowering thing. And she had us get blogs for the course earlier this semester. So that was the first step. And I set that up and I got my own domain. And that wasn't difficult. The hardest part was picking a theme, it's only as difficult as you make it. And then the second part, I guess, was getting the hosting and then setting up the RSS feed. But she sent me the tutorial, and it was a really long day because I was figuring it out on my own. And I have to say, being Jeremy's partner in crime on this project, that's one of my biggest recommendations would just be find a buddy and don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, now that I know how to do this, I could set up another class in an hour or two. Like, it wouldn't, as long as the content was brought to me, but putting the structure in place is really not that difficult. And now that I know how to do it, like, if someone ever asked me for help, I could easily just set it up for them. It's not too hard. And then Jeremie and I, we worked so well together. We had complementary expertise. So I was willing to figure that out while he's working more with like the literature, picking the reading lists and things like that. And for me, that's the details. Like, I got to get this thing all set up, and then because it is transferable. Like, we've got that structure in place, and that model can be used for different classes now. So have someone to work with. And then also a lot of it is like problem solving and figuring out what makes sense in organization, and you're not going to come up with the best solution on your own without talking through your ideas with another person. So I think trying to do it alone it's just not fun, and it takes a lot longer.
Yeah, and there's no one to yell at. There's no one you can blame if they're out the room. Something you said, Danielle, and something Jim said is reminding me that I really think one of the advantages of going ahead and taking the risk or the time to use platforms that, what I always say, exist on the planet, there's just things that are out there in the world, is I think most teachers are trying to make their classroom not be like school, not feel like school, trying to have students find some genuine questions to ask or do some real work, like work that goes on anywhere. And one of the things about using platforms that aren't intended for school like WordPress or Tumblr or Twitter or whatever. They weren't made for us. They weren't made for educational structures. And so they don't have all that baggage with them that comes with, this feels like school. This feels like I'm checking off my boxes. And so I think there's the other good reason why you might want to play with something that's not necessarily that you have to kind of tweak in order to make it. Then I think we're less likely to behave like we're in school on these platforms, particularly for students who come with a history of having used those tools and they don't have that baggage associated with school with them. You know, students who use Tumblr or other things that have a nicer aesthetic use them in those ways and not in funky classroom ways. So it's the other advantage, I think, of working through it. And yes, I love Danielle's email. Victory is mine, all caps.
The point you bring up, I mean, you bring up a lot of great points there, Kim, and one of the ones, going back to Daniel's and yours, is, it changes the aesthetic and the possibilities for our students to understand the space. And I think, the notion that we have Jaimie and Danielle designing a class together across two sections and understanding where those two might, coexist and where they might separate, and this notion of the class is more of a flow and that porous nature of it between the two, is the idea of a connected course, right? Like, it does have a potential parallel and tangential, but not necessarily, a kind of another module of, like, here's the donut, same donut here lined up. No, like, they're kind of defined by Danielle or Jaimie based on their teaching, based on their thinking, based on their approach, but also, like, there's no two ways why those two experiences and those two streams can't cross in some meaningful, powerful ways. And I really love the notion of team teaching. I team taught when I first did it online DS 106 with Martha Burtis. I taught it with Alan Levine. I taught it with Paul Bond. I think once I started co-teaching with Martha Burtis, I've never gone back to teaching alone. So every course I decided to teach, I taught in tandem with someone else. And that's a real big thing that I didn't even think to bring up, Danielle, that you really nail about connected courses as an abstract way of thinking about your pedagogy, and that these technologies are important and in some ways instantiate as a kind of structure that we can kind of deal with. So I really, really like that discussion, and that's something I wouldn't even thought to bring up when we're talking about the architecture. But it's funny, as much as we want to talk about tech, you know what? It goes back to what it provides us as an experience for students. And I think that's refreshing and rewarding to think that we're using this example to reinforce what we're doing as a kind of notion of our pedagogy. Like, this is not because we can say we use WordPress versus Drupal versus an LMS. This is because it provides some really interesting possibilities for us to rethink relationships that are mediated by this platform called the web, or it's probably more than a platform. And the way in which the web, which has for 25 years, changed our culture, is also instantiating itself and changing the way we think about teaching and learning. And I think in good ways. I mean, there's a lot to be afraid of, but there's always a lot to be afraid of. I think there's more to be excited about, And with that, I'm excited to see Jaimie back.
Me too. I don't really know what happened, actually.
All about the transitions. You know what's happening? You were burning up the internet so hot, it shut down.
I'd like to believe that. I don't know. I just changed computers. I'm not sure what's going on with the other one. Sorry about that, everyone.
Oh, please.
Hey, did you see this question that came through? Because I actually think Jaimie can speak to this, because I think Channel Islands is approaching this a little bit differently. But the question was a practical question, like, better to host course website at institution or on your own? And of course, Jim, I know you're going to have stuff to say about that, but that's really interesting to me. What do you think?
Well, I can share a little bit about that because while our institution did go through domain of one's own, which Jim definitely can speak about, and we sort of branded it. I say we as though I had a part of it, but our fabulous academic technology folks, they branded it CI Keys, and so all of my students had a fairly seamless process with creating their own blog site. I did have folks come in and do a tutorial for the students, but some students missed it and they did a 7-minute video. Our technology folks did a 7-minute video, and it was really easy for students to set up. I had one student who clearly did not follow the instructions, and so she created her own blog independently using WordPress as well, and I had a really hard time syndicating it. I have no idea why, which I guess is my point. I don't really know why she couldn't syndicate it, and then I just had a hard time. She couldn't update it, so I really had a hard time helping her because she went through a different process, and so I don't really know necessarily what the barriers were there, but I guess funneling it all through one central resource just allows for streamlining of information and protocol, and it allows me to be able to better focus on delivering the content and the experience and building the community, and I still help with technology related stuff just because we kind of have to also wear that hat, but it allows me to sort of have other support that is in place. So I found that to be very beneficial, but I also think what it really enables is that they're more connected to this experience from a global perspective, that they, I hope, will take their blogs with them and make it a website. One of my classes is making an e-portfolio, but it kind of, by making it more institutionalized, it allows for them to take this with them beyond one class. And that's where I'd like to get my students to be able to better frame their experience with blogging in my class, is what Jim talked about at the beginning, which is really using this as an opportunity to build their digital identity, and then as they take other classes, build things into it. And so I think that the decision that this person asked about is pretty important, and I think personally there's a lot of benefits with going through one centralized process. I don't know of any other resources other than domain of one's own, which Jim can talk about, but that has provided many benefits here at CI.
It's funny. Yeah, we are almost out of time, Tim, but we don't listen. Time doesn't constrain us. We transcend time. I want to say this briefly about that. Like, I really feel like with Danielle, like when I first got a domain in 2003 and a web hosting, like it really opened up a door. And I think UMW was very much for us in 2004 when we did it as a group. It really opened up a door for our group. And why we did Domain of One's Own is so that it would hopefully open up doors for faculty and students to understand what's possible. Now, in an ideal world, I think people would go out and make their own decision and buy their own domain and web hosting, and we would have a way that we could syndicate all that stuff in seamlessly so that you could just drop off your domain wherever you live, wherever you bought it, and the stuff you did could come into that class. Thing is, whether we like it or not, to be practical, we find that it's going to be a lot easier sell if we have support for faculty and for students to do this, if we have an infrastructure that we can guarantee, make some guarantees to them, make it easy, and there's that easy comes up again, as much as we want to struggle with the tension between easy and hard. So Domain of One's Own was kind of an intervention to help more people do it. Just like with UMW blogs, the real ascension of it, or the kind of apotheosis of Domain of One's Own, will when we don't need it. When people just have their own space and they understand that that's a valuable thing to have, beyond listening to Jim Groom and getting bored of him talking about Domain of One's Own on and on again, like they say, oh, of course, it's a portfolio, it's a place I can build courses, it's a place I can, imagine how I would do a survey through Lime Survey or build a wiki. Like, they just had a sense of what it provided them. I think we're still very much in the early stages of trying to educate people what this could possibly provide them. And the platform really gets at, it's kind of the infrastructure of a lot of best pedagogy we've been talking about, right? Because it quickly turned into a pedagogy talk. And what's nice is it sits on top of this infrastructure that is eminently affordable, that is manageable by an individual, and I think it does treat, I think, Kim, you went back to this point again and again, it gives them invaluable skills. And like Jaimie, you pointed out, like it enables you to focus on some of the literature that you want to do, and that the technology, while not invisible or seamless, is manageable and also personalized in some way. So it's interesting because it's a real struggle between these two poles of making it simple, but also making it real and making it relevant. And there's a kind of, it's an interesting tension. I'll say that it is 6:01 here on the East Coast, but like I said, we don't adhere to time limits as much as Jameson hates me for saying that. And so I am going to say, does anyone have last words who didn't feel like there was a point they wanted to make, couldn't make, etc.?
Build all the connected courses, all of them.
I guess that's victory. You guys are smart. You're like, it's 6 o'clock. I want to go. How about you?
It's only 3 here. You have to go teach 2 more classes.
All right. There you go. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. Thanks for any and everyone who listened and asked questions and tweeted along. This will be archived at some point very soon because the folks at DML are professionals. And we will see you, if you're interested, on Friday at 5 p.m. No, at some time on Friday, there's a discussion about IndieWeb. And what that discussion will do is it will talk about some other tools, WordPress being one we talked about pretty exclusively in this, talking about some other tools, but also a different philosophy about how the web works. And IndieWeb suggests and has as its principle that people maintain and control their own data as a part of understanding being a kind of a responsible citizen online. So it really does reinforce a lot of what we talked about here today. And we'll be joined by Simon Thompson, who's in the UK, who's being experimenting with a connected course, and also by Ben Verdmuller and Eringer Ritchie, who actually are IndieWeb folks who designed an application called Gnome, which we'll be talking about, and by Mikhail Gershevich, who's working with Channel Islands, and who will be discussing some of the work he does there, but also being a kind of a respondent in some of the questions about what the hell is this IndieWeb, and what does it matter, and how does it relate to connected courses. So if you're interested in any of those questions, please tune in at 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or Eastern Standard Time, or some Eastern Time. And it can be earlier on the Pacific and later in the UK, just so you know how time works. It's weird. It's relative. Okay? So that's that. I'll shut up. You can turn it off now. Bye-bye.